Hello and welcome to another episode of the Game of Loans podcast. And today I'm genuinely delighted, actually, and I say that every episode, but I am genuinely delighted to be joined by Aaron Knightley of Knightley Investment Group. Aaron, how are you doing today?
Hi, Sam. Yeah, very well, thank you. And again, thanks for having me on. Looking forward to it and tucking into some questions.
Yeah, absolute pleasure, mate. Absolute pleasure. But no, look, I know, Aaron, at the moment, I can't seem to move to see amazing stuff that you're putting out, especially on Instagram. But for those people that don't know who you are or haven't come across you yet, do you want to just give us a bit of a backstory of who Aaron Knightley is and what you're up to now?
Yeah, so summary. Background in steel construction logistics. Eventually moved into, so we're talking about sort of 6-7 years ago, moved into development, very early stage, single dwelling, learning on the job. Knew that had entrepreneurial traits, desire within me that I wanted to do something different than full-time employment. Was given certain opportunities when I was a lot younger to go in with someone who was already established. I managed to fast track my way kind of learning on certain jobs that I was given a chance to be involved in, and financially as well. And then jumped straight into full-fledged educational into property and well, I'd say more property and business learning on the side. Fast forward a few years, I ended up sort of sidetracking more into financials, where I began learning a lot about finances, raising junior equity, and then being introduced to certain individuals who were key at the time, because then they fast-tracked who I was then introduced to down the line to what we do today. And it's really, I've gone from sort of the full-time employment to then being structured into development, learning very much about property, thinking that was going to be my long-term goal, property and development. That's where I thought I wanted to go. And then, really learned that although mathematics certainly isn't something that I get on with, give me a calculator, I'm great, but on its own, no, but very much in the financials and numbers, ended up getting on very well. So ended up going into more financial sort of investment side of things, and just through people that I'd met and then working with certain investment offices, I realised that actually, 1, I really enjoy it. 2, very rewarding. 3, I seem to be pretty good at it. And 4, I can see a long-term goal. So really, I see my future continuing with investments, now making passive investments, more as an armchair now, don't tend to be actively involved in anything that we invest in. And here we are today. So, and we'll probably dive into where it's going and what I do and so forth. So, very quick overview.
There's so many things in there that I've written down on my little pad of sort of tangents that I could go into. So I need to play the role of host really well now and construct something very quickly as to where I'm going to go with a lot of that stuff. But there's one thing in there that I thought was really interesting, and that was that you mentioned, obviously, early doors it was kind of learning on the job. But then you also mentioned kind of the education side. And this seems to be a bit of a running theme about talking a little bit about property education in particular, or investment education. I'm sure I'm not alone. Anyone listening have probably been bombarded with Forex training and whatnot on LinkedIn, Instagram, and that sort of stuff. But you've obviously had a bit of a taste of both. Do you think that your success has been down to actually doing both? Or do you think if you went back in time and had a chat with yourself, say 6 years ago, you'd steer yourself more in one direction over another?
So my biggest thing and my biggest hold up with education is that academically, I'm no good. And I say I'm no good. It's not that, I can't do anything within a classroom. I could, but it wasn't my strength. I had no interest when I was at school. Just had no interest. I was just all about athletics, sports. Did many years of boxing when I was younger, and that was my interest in football. So I had no interest in a classroom, but I knew that I liked learning on the job, and then you don't really learn. I don't think you really start making steps, until you're 16 plus anyway. So, we all kind of know that school is very much, it'd be better if you went later on in life. But so self-education was key for me when I knew that there was more to life than going down a route of the typical employment. And that's obviously a big subject, everyone touches on that. But when I got a taste of education through going to a property event, so really I'd say the spark was I did attend early property events because I was going down the route and where I thought my long-term plan was through development. Well, there's not a development network, there's just property. So you kind of start that, that's very much a base for anyone getting into development or property. So I went there and then I just knew that there was a real spark about learning and listening to those that were doing it or were going through it. And I thought, yeah, I like this. But then very quickly you learn about all the fees that they want, and don't get me wrong. Like I say, there are some companies out there that I'm sure are doing very well and I'm sure all of them have got proven, candidates who have gone through and they've done very well. I don't doubt that. And they are there. But for me to outlay such big amounts with time and effort and what may take me a little bit longer on my own because you're trying to find your own resources, well, to me, that's worth it for the money that, if you keep that by, but you can learn it over time, then you've still got that pot of money to then begin yourself. So that's really the way that I saw it. And when I started educating myself, I wasn't very much I'll do 1 hour a day. I mean, I became obsessed with it almost, was constantly reading, was constantly learning. And then when I found out about Audible, I mean, that was just, you've heard it as well. I think it's on a lot of my calls, Audible, but even when Mark Wright said it, and it's good to hear it from Mark Wright, was two things. Can't remember the other thing that he mentioned, but it was a mentor on an Audible. And Audible is just the biggest game changer. I mean, you can just listen to it wherever. So I listen to Audible, I'd say minimum 2 hours every single day. And I've done that for the last 6 years. I've got a huge rack up of a library and hours and days that I've listened to, nearly a month in listening. And it's paid dividends. So, yeah, I'm a really big believer in that time and effort, and you put it in, you learn everything yourself. But I haven't really had a mentor as such that I've ever paid, but I'm lucky enough that there are individuals within my life that are doing very well, that I can pick up a phone and say, I'm not sure about this, I'm not sure about that. And they can, guide me without going, by the way, Aaron, that's £50 for that 5-minute phone call. I don't get that. So I'm lucky in that sense. So yeah, I just became obsessed with it, really. It was just, and that might be what differs to other people where they go, well, actually, I need education. I don't need education because I've become obsessed about improving myself. And I think that's what makes the difference. You like it and you tick over and you do an hour a day. I didn't. I became obsessed by it. So I still am to this day. So
it's almost like an addiction, isn't it? Education, because I get that. And I've said this a couple of times before on various things I said, so I'll keep it short and sweet for anyone that's heard it before. But I did I actually did 2 history degrees. That's how obsessed with research I am. And one of the things that I always struggled with is if I was given like a 6-month period of time to write an essay or whatever, I would spend so much of that time researching, reading. And then I'd suddenly get to a point and I'd go, oh my God, I've got like 2 weeks to write this ridiculously long essay. And I'd always wait too long to take action. And it actually had really bad implications on me because when I actually turned in my dissertation for my master's degree, I didn't do very well in it. And my mentor then said, Sam, you should have done so much better on this because, you are better. I know you. I know what you're capable of doing. And it's just not good enough. But I didn't give myself time enough to put the ideas down on paper. And what I sort of learned from that is a couple of things when it comes to education, especially a lot of people, obviously I talk to property investors. Number one, realize that there is a time when you just need to take action on the education that you get, but also, and something I think that you sort of, I think probably are a great advocate of and a good example of, is we're all born with a brain, and actually there's enough free stuff out there that if you go out there and find it yourself, you can take that information and take the time to comprehend it inside of your own head and you can create your own path and your own course, based on that, on taking bits of snippets of information. Because that's what I did at doing a history degree. You write an essay based on reading 20 books of other people's opinions, and you use those opinions to formulate your own. So, and there's so much free stuff available now, isn't there? So, a lot of people could say, what's the need for a course?
Well, so what I'll do is, just as I think of things, I'm just going to jot things down that I don't miss. But so one thing that, my personal opinion, that thing we've got caught up with is that those who have a following on social media, a big following, people are very much drawn to those because of the following. Whereas, I think we get blinded by who's got the biggest following and who's actually doing it and who's got the right amount of knowledge. And don't get me wrong, there's probably a balance to those who have got a big following, but I think we are naturally, especially the younger ones, I think, are drawn to the following first and then believing it. For example, the way that I look at it is there's so many resources of individuals who can give free information, because the ones who have the big following, don't get me wrong, it's not saying that the ones who have a big following, all of them that charge are wrong to charge, but if you have a big following, it does give you a very good position to go, well, I'll put some money on just based on my following alone to then interact with me. Whereas even if you've been on, for those who have been on my calls, some of the guys that I'm bringing in who have got good followings, we're not being charged for these calls, whereas pre-COVID-19, to organise a call like that, there would actually be a fee, even if you were to go to the event. There's no different. We're just hosting it over Zoom now. So there is free information. And also a good example is I have an individual, I've had some changes in regards to dates that I've had to move back to certain successful individuals who are going to be coming on in the coming weeks. But one guy who I have coming on next week, who I've had to swap, he done a lot of work in the city in the financials. Well experienced in what he does. He's very well honed in on his his sectors that he works in, and we can gain a lot from him without having to sort of feel that because he has this mass following that we sort of owe financial a reward to him. So I would always look at it as that if you're looking at someone who's got a huge following and you want to learn from them, 9 times out of 10, there's going to be someone who hasn't got the huge following, but likely has more experience, but is just not promoting it and is very humble, probably within the shadows that you can go and find it from. And again, it's free. And I've kind of done that all the way up until this point, that I've managed to learn from these people. It's like the family offices. I tell you what, you spend a day with a family office who are investing in stocks, property, who are buying land just to sit on, who are backing big developers, who are investing in agriculture, everything. They invest in everything. You spend a day with them. I tell you, you'll learn so much, and they won't turn around to you at the end of the day and go, by the way, that's £400 for spending the day with me. They're just happy to have someone who's willing to learn, and that's why I like the my recent post, the likability factor, because if someone can look at you and go, he's a really nice person, really humble, hasn't got a chip on his shoulder. There's a little bit of naivety, which we like, because that shows that there's still that learning curve. And ultimately, we can see a little bit of him in us when we were younger. They'll tell you all day long, and I've said that a million times, they'll tell you everything you want to learn, and then just be specific and value their time. Don't go in there with 100 stupid questions. Before you ever spend time with these people, have in your back pocket like 10 questions you'd really want to know, and just throughout the time you spend with them, just drop them in there, and then value their time, and then leave, or finish it with a bit of respect, so they think he didn't take the pee, but he was a really nice guy. We'd have him back anytime. So that kind of thing, and that's kind of what I've done in order to fast track whilst learning myself. So yeah, it's a combination. It has paid in dividends.
Yeah, it's funny actually you mentioning the follower thing, because, and I told you we'd be going off on tangents, didn't I, Aaron? So here we go.
That's it.
You mentioned the following scenario, and I'm obsessed at the moment with with just teaching myself the tiniest intricacies of marketing. I've never had a formal marketing education, but I've taught myself social media marketing over the last 3 years. I teach it now to a select small group of people as well. But I think as a result of that, I always need to be, ahead of the game and learning. And so I'm constantly looking at recommendations on books and Audible and all that kind of stuff on marketing books. And I came across one particular one that seemed to be getting some decent reviews on Amazon. And one thing that I always do when it comes to marketing stuff is I go and I check out the author first to see what kind of stuff they're posting on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, whether they've got a YouTube channel or not. I always do that. And I came across a book recently, and it was actually being promoted by another Instagram account. So I reckon the guy probably what he did was he, paid that person 50 quid to put a few stories out promoting the book, which is, it's a great way of advertising. Very, very, good return on investment usually on those sorts of things. But then I did some diving. The guy who was talking about how to grow a social media following didn't have an Instagram account.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'm not buying your book. Like, there's no way I'm going to buy your book because and I couldn't find his company. I barely found the publisher of the book on Instagram. I did eventually find him on LinkedIn, but he wasn't really doing much. And I was thinking, even though so it kind of is the opposite effect of kind of what you just said, is this guy had no followers because he didn't have accounts. So I thought, how can you teach me to do something more than I'm already doing now when I'm doing more than you're doing? And I can't remember the name of the guy, which is quite annoying because I meant to keep track of him to see whether he actually did start anything. And I even tried to track him down so I could just write him a note just to say, look, you've released this book. I'm really interested to find out how you learned this stuff. When you don't have accounts, not being a dick, just asking that. So I'm glad that you brought up the followers thing because it just sparked that memory, that bit of research in my head.
Well, that work. So that's on the flip side, isn't it? So in order to promote that side of social media, you need to obviously have that. I mean, I totally agree. I can't remember who it was. So after lockdown, and we're allowed that little bit more freedom, and it eases up that much. There's a photo shoot that I'm a part of, which I'm really looking forward to. It was organised before COVID-19, and there's just a few small brands and some good brands actually who are quite excited to work with, which I'm going to tie into everything that we do, and just it's kind of like, I suppose, a bit of a new venture on the side for me. But I was looking for a really good photographer, someone who is already doing the kind of things that I want. And so anyway, I found someone, and they're actually coming with someone that I personally know, so which is good because I've had good feedback and I've seen their stuff. And they've got a really good Instagram and they've got really good photos. But one thing that is interesting is before I came across him and I was looking for a really good photographer, is that I was searching up all these local photographers who had a great website, but there was no Facebook, no Instagram. There was, so it's funny because now we're not so bothered about the website, and the website was very dated. The photos were okay, but there was nothing new and unique about it. Whereas I wanted to click on, see an Instagram and see all these amazing photos. And then, so instantly, as soon as I saw there was no social media, I thought it's not for me, because I want someone who's really current and proving that they can be really current. So hopefully when we work together, I'll feel like I've got a really good chance of what I'm trying to do to be the best it can. So yeah, so it plays in both ways, doesn't it? But I think it's very much like, you'd never find, in regards to a lot of investment stuff, it's funny because you would never find a family office promoting on any social media. It just wouldn't happen, because they're very much, building wealth very quietly, looking poor on paper as possible, but essentially very rich in assets and elsewhere. So yeah, it's the flip side, isn't it? So
do you think that's where things are sort of just headed business wise? I know you mentioned obviously maybe the family office is going to be maybe a bit of an anomaly, but just in general, we are heading into a period where people are less worried about a website and they're more worried about whether somebody that they want to go and work with actually has a presence on social media, because that's how they can maybe get to know them a little bit more. And you mentioned earlier on about personality, actually get to know a person behind a brand and make a decision that they want to work with them based on the fact that they're good, nice, honest people, or they resonate with something from their past or something like that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, for me, I relate to people that if I'm looking at if I was looking at, so for someone, so one thing, let's keep it in education because there's a good example and I always use it, but is when I started out going to all these events, and it wasn't just property, but I was going to different events and so forth, and you're looking at all these so-hows on to do this and within 12 months, or, follow this method at this cost and you could have this as a result and so forth. And don't get me wrong, I think with work applied, and commitment to it and discipline, you could probably pull off a lot of it. I just don't like the financial commitment to paying someone that amount to then go and do that. But when you hear a lot of the speeches are the same, whether it's a business event, whether it's a property event, or whether it's another event, the stories are the same. We started out in debt, 150,000 or 200,000 in debt, of credit, but when you look behind the scenes, their families were wealthy, they were rich, or, they had a silver spoon, or a business partner they came into had all the cash. And so I like very much, and one of the guys that will be on my call, which I mentioned to you guys on the group, is that he came from nothing. And then I'll send you an interview of his podcast that he was on. He came from a single mother who brought him up in London for nothing, working multiple jobs. So I like those stories that, because I relate to it on how we grew up as well. And I like those because they're genuine, because then it shows that they'll talk about hard work. They'll talk about the reality of it didn't happen overnight, especially this guy who I'm on about in my mind at the moment, who's going to be on the call. It took years. He talks about how he went from one job to another job, to another job, to another job, and a lot of people would say, what, you've been going from what, you've had 10 jobs, and they would look at that like, what's wrong with you? Well, actually, maybe he's just very entrepreneurial and he hadn't realized yet that he's destined for bigger things. It's just that he can't fit into a company because he's built for more. So I like his story, and therefore I can relate. And therefore, when these people come on, which ties into why I started up the group, I love to absorb as much as possible because, there's just so much you can take away, and little tips and tricks on what they've done and things to look out for. And the one thing that I do like about self-education is, especially with investment, is I'm not afraid to say that I've lost a lot of money because I invested into things that I didn't really know. I did know about them, but I wasn't prepared for when things went wrong. I didn't know how it could be recovered, or not that I could have played a huge part to change it because it was out of my hands. But if I'd have known the worst case scenario from the beginning, well, then perhaps that would have changed my decision from going in. However, from making those mistakes, I will never make those again. So if I'd have had if I'd have paid to make me avoid that mistake, I'd never have gone through it to make sure that it never happens again.
You never feel the pain of it yourself.
No, and and it wasn't just me, it was my family as well, because we were doing some joint investing at the time. So it's my funds, it's my family's funds. So there's been a couple of times, I've had ventures, we've started up wedding businesses and so forth like that, just small ventures which worked, and then it dried up and it was more work than we wanted and stuff like that. We've done small conversions on trailers and stuff that we flipped and stuff, and so I've trialed a lot of things and have lost money, but I'll never make the same mistake again. So I like the fact that I've gone through it because I know now I'll never make that same mistake again.
Well, all I was going to say on that point was, it's almost like you could say, yeah, you lost money, but you've gained an experience, and so almost you paid for that to get that experience in a way. So actually, it's not money lost.
Yeah, exactly. And to be honest with you, my outlook is money always comes back anyway. If you carry on working hard, money will come back anyway. So it wasn't like you know, it was the end of the world for me. It was a big kick in the teeth. You know, it was hard to get over for the first few nights, but after that, it is what it is. You know, I can't change it. I think, you know, I think when you go through, as long as soppy as it is, as long as the family's healthy, I'm healthy. I really couldn't give two monkeys. So you know, that's really it. At the end of the day, we don't do what we do for any other reason. Well, I certainly don't do. You know, I don't do what I do because, you know, if I didn't have a reason to be doing it, I wouldn't probably be doing it. So
Yeah,
that's what it comes down to.
It's times like these, we were talking off air, isn't it? It's times like these that you actually are reminded about what the important things are in your life in general, and you can realign your work to that. But one thing you've mentioned a little bit in terms of losing when it comes to investment, and I'm really keen to talk to you a little bit about more your investment side, because I think when people say investing nowadays, because there is so many options, you know, it is, as I said before, I get the emails twice a day and about 17 messages on Instagram about joining Forex trading programs. You've got your old style stocks and shares, you've got commodities, gold, silver, whatever, you've got property. So I think people get a bit confused when people say, you know, I'm an investor. People think about, well, what do you invest in? And even within those categories, there's multiple subcategories. So let's talk about kind of you getting into the world of investing, and then what kind of spurred your interest in that, and then what you sort of started investing in, and what flared your interest really.
So what flared my interest? So one of the biggest turning points was in about 2000, it was probably about 2000, coming up, probably early 2017, end of 2016, start of 2017, round about then, right? We were looking at a land site which we weren't going to be involved in, but we were going to be raising basically the equity on it. We knew the landowner, we were local to the landowner, and it had big off plans, and we knew a developer in London who could take on such a site. So we just met the two. They were going to bring some of their own funds, but what we wanted to do is instead of just putting ourselves in a position of a sourcer as such, it wasn't strong enough. Without going into the detail, we played that we had a really secure agreement with the site. We did, but we didn't have it in contract. So we needed to feel that we had something else that we were bringing to the table. So we thought, well, let's bring either the senior or the junior debt. I was still learning it at this time, but I did know about it at this time because, again, I just spent every day learning about it. So we needed to bring something else to the table for this site for us not to get bumped off, essentially. So we thought, well, if we bring the site, this kind of overview that we've secured the agreement of the site, if we can bring the equity as well, either senior or junior, which ended up being the senior, then we put ourselves in a really good position that if the deal gets signed off, you know, we can be built into this quite healthy. So that's what we did. And in order to do that, we went into London and we met with several private banks. And there was one meeting that was sort of defining for me, because I essentially hosted the meeting at their offices, and we put together a PowerPoint and stuff like this. And there was a boardroom of directors in there and the developers and so forth. And, you know, I was still young at the time. So, you know, sort of 3 years younger than what I am now, 3 or 4. And we put together this presentation and it just went amazing. It just went really well. And while I was going through it, I just knew about talking about the numbers, the raising of the money, getting really good feedback there and then from the directors. There was just something that I thought, do you know, there's a lot of risk in development. We've been involved in some smaller stuff, you know. Then we did we were involved in project managing like HMO. There was 2 HMO refurbs that we done. It was a lot of work, and you know, at the time we were still doing our own sort of stuff with employment, my wife's business and stuff like that. And we had a lot of, you know, like my son was younger. We had a lot going on, and it was a lot of legwork, you know, a lot being there doing this, and the roles weren't evenly split to who I was working with at the time. So I just thought I like doing the numbers, and I think it was at that point I thought, actually, I like talking about equity, I like talking about investments, and then basically from there, I just I very much went on my own heading into London. I went to certain events. I went to all the typical events. I still went to the Mayfair Pin, Blackfriars. I did all of that. But from going into London time and time and time again and thinking I was wasting my time, I ended up meeting the right people, because although I couldn't be bothered to be there, in all honesty, in the beginning, because I thought I was wasting my time, I was wasting money on the train. I was just putting in time. I was ringing my wife going, nothing's happened, stuff like this. And when I met with certain people, I always went in with the enthusiasm. Even if I couldn't be bothered, I still had to show it. And that's why I talk about the likability factor, is because then I was noticed and I was approached by several individuals. I got up and spoke in front of 175 people.
Wow.
I thought, give it a go. Told them what I was about, what I was doing, where I wanted to go. And then lo and behold, after the event, I was approached by certain individuals that said, come and meet us again. If you're in the area, come and meet us. Of course, I went and met them. And then from there, I was then able to be introduced to certain individuals. And that's where it really paid off, because I still had the enthusiasm, even though I couldn't be bothered. When I was approached by these individuals and I was invited, that's when I met the first office. That's when I met a genuine investor. An investor, in my eyes, is someone who is actively investing, not just in one area, but who is financially literate, who is making smart decisions and is actually doing it. And I managed to meet quite successful individuals. I learned from them. I'd come back and then I'd organise a follow-up 3 weeks later where, they'd show me a site or they'd show me something they purchased. And then it just snowballed to people that they introduced me to, because I'd ask, I'd say, oh, do you know someone in it? Because I'm looking to do this. And I never made out like I knew it all, or I never made out that I'd been there and I'd done it. So there was none of that ego there, and they could see that there was none of that there, and they were more than welcome to tell me and introduce me to people. And it just paid. That's why it's all about relationships. So it was very much slowly catch a monkey, but I got there in the end, basically, with who I needed to be around and to learn what I've learned today. So it did take time, though. Stressful.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, it sounds like a lot of work, and I think people listening, there are a lot of people out there, I think that property in particular, it's sold as the easy way of making money, when we know it definitely isn't. Otherwise, everyone would be doing it. But from and it goes back to what you were saying earlier on about the person that you were talking about who is a multimillionaire now, started from nothing. It wasn't an overnight success. It takes time. So, but the way I see it is, every single one of those visits into London, every single one of those meetings, that you were tired and maybe you didn't want to go to, they were all worthwhile, because it's that compounding effect, isn't it, of just being there time and time again. And I had to convince the guy that runs my company quite regularly to allow me to go to a lot of these meetings, because he wants to see the quick buck. He wants to see that there's money coming in for me taking maybe some time out of the office to go to these meetings. But I know that I don't make money on the first, second, third, fourth of these meetings you go to. It's the 10th, 11th, 12th, maybe even further into the future, isn't it? And so, I think for people that are listening to this that are, stressed out by that proposition, I think it's just about making that commitment and going, look, I'm not going to make £100 million tomorrow, but I might in 10 years' time. And would I rather put 10 years of work in to make a silly amount of money in that period of time? Or would I just prefer to carry on as I am now for the rest of my life?
So so it is a numbers game. So I totally believe that you've got a stockpile in what you're doing in order to get a few that work. It so is a numbers game, and that's what I found was the effort was a lot to do it, and that's why I say the legwork is there. And it's like, I'm going to include in my ebook, one thing I put a big disclaimer in there saying that all I'm going to do is offer 23 ways in which I have successfully found high net worth investors. The disclaimer is the legwork is on you. The legwork on you, and I put in there, you must have the likability. You must be willing to learn. The legwork, the effort. All I'm doing is I'm providing sources which you're probably not looking at to where you can actually go and find them. And I'm pretty damn sure that these 23 ways, someone might possibly have used 3 of them, but the others they're going to go, never knew that. Well, I haven't thought of that. Well, I never would have done that. Oh, I don't feel comfortable doing that. But if you do them, that's why, I'm very fortunate that I'm able to pull in some of these guys that are coming in the next 3, 4, 5 weeks, is because luckily I've made connections that I can actually say, I've got a bit of a standing with some people that I can ring and say, look, I'm looking for someone who's of a net worth of 20 million plus. Do you know anyone that would be willing to have a chat with me? And luckily, I know them well enough where they can go, actually, yeah, we'll make a call for you, because I've explained what I'm trying to do. So it's put me in a good position in regards to bringing good people in on the networking calls. That's paid off quite well. But it's also paid off well in the fact that if I'm looking for new ventures, or what I do, so I try and follow the system of like a family office. So a family office invests in multiple areas. Now, don't get me wrong, a family office is here in regards to, what they invest in and the capital that they have. One family office that I work with recently sold up a tech company, which was for 40 million. They haven't got 40 million in the bank anymore because they've spent a lot of it, but 40 million, and it's nothing. It's so small to them. And so they're so cash rich. They can just invest in so many avenues that create further generational wealth. I like that idea. I'm in no rush for a 12-month turnaround of big money. I quite enjoy watching things grow in a realistic way and in a lower risk way. That's the way that I prefer it, because I know that, 1, I'm really reducing my risk. 2, I really understand it now. And also, when I started, a lot of the stuff that I was investing in was sort of 15 to 24 month terms. So, you have to test it and have to trial it to see it come back in those 15, 24 months. And when it does, you go, that was a really good return. It was better than property. And I'll let you go on to the next question, but just to start, I wouldn't say anymore, I'm a huge fan of property. Like, we talk about property and I bring property people on the calls, but there are a lot of ways to earn really good returns other than property. And property, I've dealt in property and I've been involved with our tenants and stuff like that. And to be honest, for me, it's just a nuisance. It's a pain. And at the moment, for where our family's going, I'm not interested in property at the moment. It's not something that I'll actively invest in at the the
There's a couple of things you picked up on there that I think are really interesting, and that's the first and foremost, the sort of the talking about these family offices, and as you say, they sell one thing, 40 million, and then it's out the door because they've then got the ammunition to go and invest elsewhere and grow it. And I think people get a bit stressed out by seeing these kind of things taking place and going, I wish I could do something similar. But money makes money, and people say you don't need money to make money, and I think that's absolutely true, especially in the modern age with e-commerce and whatnot. You can start a business in a day essentially, and probably start making money within 2. But to become in that ultra wealthy category, money makes money. And it's a little bit like, I saw somebody put a little infographic on Instagram recently, which highlighted Warren Buffett's wealth from sort of 19 years of age to now. And it really skirts along the bottom for a long, long period of time. And then suddenly it just goes up. And he obviously hit that tipping point where the money that he was reinvesting was compounding, and just suddenly it just went through the roof. And I think, that just shows that actually if your goal is to be of a serious level of wealth, then you need to, unless you come up with, the next iPhone, which nobody's looking to be doing at the moment. You do have to have that patience, and it takes a little bit of time. And as you say, long-term, low-risk strategies are what most people are probably going to end up making their money in. But you have to have the commitment and the patience to do that.
Yeah. That's the thing, and it can go 2 ways. So let me just note down something I just want to mention is it can go 2 ways in my eyes. So there's a lot of things out there that promote, stick in 200-300 quid into a training or start on, let's use Forex. Jason Greystone, is very successful in Forex. Now, I've spoken to Jason many a time about other things and whatnot, but I have asked him the question, let me try and get my head around this whole Lamborghini image on Instagram. You know, how is it, you know, because it's something I don't know about. I understand it, I get the concept, I know how it works, but I don't, you know, the ins and outs of the drawdown of funds, you know, how quick you turn around, how you develop a larger account, I don't dive into all of that. But Jason Greystone has made a very successful life out of it, and he's able to invest in other things. You know, but he explains it that it's a percentage over the year. So he's got to a stage now where he's consistent and regular enough and successful enough that he may turn over 40% a year of his returns. You know, so he's got to that stage. He said, but it doesn't start like that. He said, it's not a case of, you know, you put in £200 and you turn the account into like 10 grand overnight. It doesn't happen like that. He said, you end up having to get funded. So you need an investor. If you haven't got capital, you know, and you start out with £1,000 account of your own money, you're not going to be able to grow that quick enough to turn this Lamborghini lifestyle. You need to prove, this is the way he explained it to me. He said, you need to prove that over 2-3 years, you consistently, on that £1,000, return 15%, say, every year. Once you've got the proof that you've turned over 15% for 3 years, you could then go to an investor and say, it was only £1,000 account, but it makes no difference to the amount that was in my account. Every year I've turned over 15%. So if you give me £200,000 as an investment, I will give you 7.5% and I will take 7.5% a year. So forth, so forth. So you have to prove that the model works. So it's very similar to what I do. Luckily, I'm now in a position where my investments compound 3-4 times a year. My big bulk, our biggest allocation, we've rolled over. But it didn't start like that. It was slow. I had to be patient. You know, I'd be sitting there some nights going, God, I really hope this works and stuff like that, and making phone calls to make sure I'd done the right thing. But it takes time to compound. And like you just said about the Warren Buffett thing, that's a realistic way to go. I haven't got the next iPhone idea. I'm not a Forex trader, but I understand compounding. And luckily, where I started investing bigger bulks of capital years ago, I'm now in a position where it comes back regularly each year, capital and interest, and I'm able to recycle those amounts and interest each year. So now I've got this rolling effect that happens every year. And luckily, although I would have wanted to start maybe in my late teens, I started very much in my early 20s. Well, it was my just turning 20, but so it does take time, but it is a proven model. You can't deny that compounding is proven. The hardest part, I think, for most people is having to suck up that whole, yeah, but I'm going to have to wait in the beginning. Yeah, but I don't really want to wait. You know, my friend drives a Mercedes, you know, yeah, all right, he, you know, it's on finance, but, you know, I want a Mercedes and stuff like that. It's kind of putting that whole ego aside. It's like my wife says to anyone who ever asks about what we're doing, or whoever asks, sometimes people question my wife, she'll say, we never drive around in money. We'll never drive around in money. We'll always move any decent amount of money into an allocation. And that's the way it is, because, you know, I've got an ego that I need to be driving around in a certain vehicle, and neither's my wife, and we're on the same page. So it helps to have someone on the same page. And, you know, I think you've heard me say it before. I know I say it almost on every call, but there's one millionaire, high net worth, who we work with quite often, and he walks around, and it's a bit of a joke, but he walks around in holes in his jeans, you know, trainers he's had for years and years. But he's absolutely laughing because he never needs to work again in his life if he doesn't want to, you know. So you can't really take the pity out of what he's wearing, because who cares what he's wearing? He's never going to work again.
I'm such a, I can't agree with you more on that. And you know, I get told off quite regularly by people sort of saying, oh, you know, you're meant to be this broker. You know, you should show that you have a bit of wealth behind you and knowledge of money, but you're sitting there at the moment doing this podcast in a Star Wars t-shirt. You know, I'm not even that big a fan of Star Wars, just thought it was a cool t-shirt. But but you know, I drive a Vauxhall Astra. You know, it's because it's cheap and it's efficient, and I've got to drive from London to Birmingham once a week or twice a week if you count it back and forth outside of lockdown. I need a cheap, efficient car, because I'd rather spend the money from that on something else. And we've got a friend who is currently looking to upgrade their car at the moment. And I would say that they live more that life that you kind of mentioned, where they kind of need to show that wealth. And, you know, they've already got a really lovely BMW, but they're looking to upgrade and spend £400 extra a month leasing a Mercedes. And look, I keep my mouth shut when we have those conversations, because you think, well, what's the point? It's up to you. If that makes you happy, that's absolutely fine. But there is, in the back of my head, I'm thinking, £400 a month, what could you be investing that in? You know, what could you be doing with that that's going to be better than driving around a depreciating asset?
Yeah, it's exactly, and it's keeping up with the Joneses, and I think that comes to your upbringing. And look, I know people that, what's really funny, and I've said it before, is that, look, I'm still on my own journey. I've not made it in any way, shape or form. I'm still very much on my own journey. I'm not bothered about what other people are doing. I'm not bothered about what people think of my journey or whatever. I'm not bothered in the slightest. But what does make me laugh is that when I first started out and I had all these big ideas of what I wanted to do, and because, again, you know, I trialed and errored a lot of things that I dipped my toe in and put money into and stuff like this, is that things that I've done well or things that I've done wrong, you know, if they've gone well, great. If they haven't, but in the beginning, it was, you know, for certainly people who were close to me, they were like, don't really get that. And that's a typical thing, you know, things are changing very quickly in the older generation, or perhaps those who don't really understand. It's a typical thing. I'm not the only one. We all have those people, but it does make me laugh, because in the beginning, I have got certain individuals that spring to mind still to this very day, who were like, it's not going to happen. Yeah, okay. All right, Aaron. Okay, Aaron. Okay. And now they ask me all the time, oh, I've got some money. What should I be doing? What should I, you know, or, you know, I was thinking about doing, and I'll get phone calls. You know, I had a message the other day from someone who I hadn't spoken to in, I don't know, like 7 years, maybe 7 years, hadn't seen him. We weren't best of friends. It's borderline, we were friends anyway. And I had a message because he'd been on my Instagram recently, and then I think he'd bumped into someone who knows me. And I got like 7 messages. I never opened them. I just blocked him because, again, it's back then, didn't really kind of want to hear anything that I had to say and stuff like that. And I just thought, if I then re-engage in conversation, I'm not gaining anything from it. I'm only going back. Do you see what I mean? So I'm not gaining anything from it. So I just cut the tie off, and it's funny because we all have those people, and it's just funny how when things go well, or when they start things happening and they see things come to life, they think, oh, maybe did I miss the boat, or should I have listened, or what? And then they start questioning. And I think a lot of people then question their own journey. And a lot of the people that I hang around with, or did used to hang around with, were a lot older than me. They've always been, 10 years older. And I think some of them look back and go, maybe I should have done that, or maybe I should have ventured into something. And I think a lot of people find a lot of bitterness in seeing other people do something that they set out to do, and they do it. So we all have those, isn't it? Yeah, we all have those people. I just think, don't worry about what I'm doing. You just focus on your own journey, and we'll leave it at that. But we all have those people. But it is funny how things change like that. But that comes into the whole, don't worry about keeping up with the Joneses. I'm on my own journey. And one thing that I did like, I can't remember who said it. I think it was Gary Vee, actually. And I don't watch a lot of Gary Vee stuff, but it is one thing that came across, was he said when he was working in his wine store, and I know his dad had a very successful business and everything like that, but when he was working in his wine store, people used to be like, why are you not coming out? Why are you not buying that new BM? Why are you not spending all the money coming out clubbing? And he said, because he was plotting and building this business that no one knew a thing about, that one day he was just going to explode and reveal all. And then he did it. Yeah, he had a good footing. Like I said, they were obviously very well off to begin with. But from what he says, he was very quiet and humble when he did it. I don't know, but that's what he claimed. I just like that idea of he was plotting, very quiet, and then one day he went, this is what I've done. So,
yeah.
Give me 2 seconds. Let me just, Sam, let me just open this. Hang on 2 seconds. Hopefully the noise isn't too...
No worries. You mentioned about people coming and speaking to you and saying, what are you investing in? So I'm going to be that annoying person now. And I'm going to say, so obviously you mentioned about property kind of dropping off your radar a little bit because you saw other things that for you just resonated a little bit more in interest in you. So I don't know whether to ask you about what you're doing now or what you did then, but maybe we'll talk about it now. So you mentioned multiple different types of investments. What are you investing in at the moment?
So I invest into, so I do peer-to-peer, I do fixed, I do stocks, and I'll do certain private lending with individuals that I'm comfortable, that I know, that I've worked with before, or that have some form of a proven track record, but I know them in some way, that I'm close to them, or, you know. So for example, we know a small builder who does his own refurbs. He does quick flips, turnaround, stuff like that. So we lend to people like him on smaller amounts where the trust is there. So, you know, if he needed X amount to go and do a refurb, you know, he managed to purchase it, but he was short on the refurb works, or he was doing like an assisted sale because he's venturing into that, then we'd be happy to go and look at it, make sure that it's right for us. And if it is, I know that he's proven that he can go, I just need it for 6 months. You can take a charge, and I'll get you out, you know, and it might be, I don't know, it could be anywhere from 7, 8, 9%. So, so peer-to-peer, again, that's kind of peer-to-peer. It's not a syndicate because I'm involved in many more, but we do peer-to-peer on a certain platform where it's proven, it's award-winning, and it has many models that we can go into. So we're not tied into one type of lending. There's one platform that we use which we can enter on different entries on how we want to. So that's term, how we want to lend it. Do we want to lend it against the one site, or do we want to spread it against multiple assets? So, and then fixed investing, that's more the long-term compounding. So we'll put it out to a larger organization, a developer, or someone that's within sort of real estate trusts, a company like that, say, and that's anywhere from an 18-month to a 24 or a 36-month term. So that's the biggest return, and that's the one that you've got to suck up in the beginning. So that's the one where someone could see a really good return, but they're going to have to get over that. I've just put out all this money, but yeah, I wanted to use that money to turn and make me a millionaire. That's the one where you kind of have to let it go and go, I have to see what comes back. And then when you see it come back, you go, blimey, that's made a really good return. I'll run it again. And then if you were to divide that amount and maybe split that over 3 times the year, then the following year or the following year after that, you're going to see it come back 3 times. So that's where that takes effect. And we will do, in the stock market. So look, I'm no expert in the stock market. I don't hand pick anymore. I got lucky on a few stocks. I got lucky with Amazon. I did start off in buying stocks when I was about 19. And I think what sparked the whole buying stocks and the interest in stocks was I got lucky. Again, it was luck. It was no calculated method that I used, but I bought into a mining company in America. And I remember going on Hargreaves and Lansdown at the time, and I read all these reports. Didn't really know too much, but I had started to educate myself. And I thought, you know, everyone likes the look of stocks. I don't know about you, but if you ask most people, they like the look of it. It's just not understanding it. I didn't really understand it.
I've got a load of books on stocks sitting there collecting dust because I like you're right. I like the idea of it, but it's diversifying. Diversifying away from my focus of what I need to be doing on the day to day. And thinking, you know, I need to put actual time and effort into that. That's the problem. It's
something that's ongoing. I mean, like I put on the group that we're on, I did the voice message about Benjamin Intelligent Investor, Benjamin Graham. It's a great book, but probably a book I'll have to reread in maybe like 3-4 years, because although I still pump into a stocks and shares account, and I pump into it quite heavily because of tax benefits and everything like that, but I prefer now to go down the route of a fully managed fund rather than hand pick. I know a lot of people now. I think it's funny because I know many people, even friends of mine, but a lot of people now are trying to hand pick. My view on hand picking is that's great. You can hand pick, you know, and buying a stock is always better than going and spending, you know, on new jeans and new trainers and stuff that you don't need. So buying a stock, you know, is always a better financial decision than spending it on something materialistic. But I don't hand pick anymore. But in the beginning, I picked this mining company, And I bought a load of shares, and I thought, oh, this looks brilliant. The reports were great. They were going into this new mining area that they were it was all eco, and they were going to find all this stuff. I didn't really know all the jargon, to be honest with you. I just saw all these great reports, and I thought, oh, it looks brilliant. And they were going to be doing this mining in this few months' time. So I went, oh, they're really cheap. I think they were like, at the time, they were maybe £7-8. I thought, what harm is like a couple of £100 going to be? So I bought all these stocks, and I remember ringing Hargreaves and Lansdown. I didn't really know too much about it. I said, so how does this work? And they said, well, this is what they're planning to do, and how much are the fees? This is our fees. I was like, oh, okay, brilliant. Yeah. So anyway, so I bought like £200 worth of this mining stock. Anyway, it was in about 2 months' time, they'd all shot up to about £52. So I was like,
what?
I'm an expert. I was like, I'm an expert. Like,
that's amazing.
I was thinking, I have a gift. But, it was just luck. There was no planning behind it. You like to think that there was planning, because then you can sort of be like, oh, it pulled off. But it wasn't anyway. So I remember ringing Hargreaves and Lansdown, and I was like, yeah, let's sell them. They've, it's made it. I remember telling my parents and at the time my fiance, before she was my wife, I remember being like, look at this. And they were like, wow, how do you know that? And I was like, no idea. It just happened. So I sold them, and then I started, so that got the real interest. And then it was only a few more years later that I bought then into Amazon in end of 2014, beginning 2015. That is that period. And again, that was by a bit of a tip-off, by reading that I think you have to, if you're going to go into a big company, you have to be at the right time, because there's no point spending a load on Amazon now. They've probably still got growth, but I do believe that when you invest into a company that, say, has a forecast of 10 billion and they're only at, say, 3-4 billion, well, they've got a lot of growth. Amazon, although I still feel they're still going to really evolve and they've got a lot of things on the horizon, it won't jump up in huge amounts over years. It will increase. I don't think it will slow down, but it's not going to make these huge jumps that it did within that period of 2015 to where we are now. So I wouldn't handpick anymore. I wouldn't say, I remember when Airbnb went as an IPO. Well, the thing with an IPO is a lot of the big institutional investors have bought up a lot of the good price stocks. So I wouldn't now handpick. So hence why I go down the route of just pumping into a fund. And I might buy a REIT every now and again, the real estate investment trust. I might buy those because they're consistent, and the reason I'd put money into those is because keeping some of your investment into liquid assets like a REIT, we could draw down on them and stuff like that. Whereas with the fund, the fund that we pump into within the stocks and shares, that's long term. I don't plan to use that until maybe I'm 40 plus. So I would never use that to draw down. But say if we did need to liquid up, then at least I've got something in an asset where I could go, right, I just need to sell all those. Or Amazon if I had to. I wouldn't want to really do that. But I could go, I need to sell all of my Amazon, get me out. But so yeah, I like stocks and shares. I'm no expert. I have dibble dabbled. I've got lucky a couple of times. And that's just an ongoing thing. But I probably won't go back to hand picking. I'll probably just.
You mentioned earlier The Intelligent Investor, the book, which ironically takes back to Warren Buffett, because he cites that book as one of the big sort of eureka moments in his life. And I can't remember, because somebody called, and I can never remember his surname, but a guy called Elliot, who was a financial planner who worked in a similar department to me when I worked at Savills years ago. He always said to me, he actually gave me his copy of The Intelligent Investor. I'm not sure if I was meant to give it back, but I still have it. So Elliot, if you're listening, you can have it back, mate, if you want. But he just said, don't read the whole thing, just read, I think it's chapter 8 and chapter 20. And effectively in there, it talks about just trackers, index trackers. Because although, yes, Warren Buffett's got, he has people that handpick stocks for him and have various different funds, and I'm sure he invests in real estate and all this kind of stuff as well. The fundamentals over that period of time is that he has consistently just put money into index trackers, because over a period of time, I think sort of most of the UK ones, and I don't know much about this, but although they fluctuate over a period of time, averages out about 7%, which is pretty decent. The compounding effect of that over a 20, 30-year period is insane if you're consistently reinvesting the dividends or reinvesting the income and adding to it. And realistically, although I am a class as a financial advisor for what I do, I'm not a IFA or anything.
Yeah,
I have one of those accounts with Hargreaves Lansdown, funnily enough. Other providers are available, but that comes back to what we were saying about the patience. That's something I know that is going to be a legacy thing for me in many, many years to come, because I know that it will compound. I roughly know when that fund will probably get to £1 million, because I've done a little bit of analysis, and I've spoken to people at Hargreaves Lansdown, very helpful people that my sister-in-law's boyfriend works there actually, which is pretty helpful. So it's helpful. But that I know, because I get a little bit of detail that's going to work. But that, like you say, it takes time, and you've just got to be patient and wait those sort of things out. Yeah,
and you can't go wrong with a fund if you're looking long term. As long as it's a strong fund. That's why any market crashes, don't really apply to me, certainly, because I don't look at it as, there's been a big drop. I mean, my stocks and shares, when COVID-19 happened, I went down to like 17%, like a massive drop. The ones that are panicking are the ones, and I know the ones that are panicking, because an investor that I work with who runs a really successful business, he turns over like 10 million a year. He's invested in all kinds of assets, but he also had a huge portion in the stock market. Now he's close to retirement. He was panicking, and I remember having the conversation, and we were talking about what he's doing and the alternatives that he was going to look at. And he was having to sell up, because the problem is, as many others who are looking to retire, when they take that much of a hit, it's going to take a long time to recover that interest and what they've lost. So then the ones who are very business minded and want to make as much as they can back, they then need to make a decision really quickly to draw out the market, and what can they now go into that's going to try and track back what they've lost. So that was one of the conversations we were having. And the ones who are closer to retirement, that's the ones that they're going to hit. So like with pensions, see, again, I love pensions, and I'm a bit of an old man when it comes to stuff like this, because I like all the forecasting in it. But with pensions, I've got, we spread it across sort of several pensions, but one pension that I think is really good is a BlackRock pension, which is LifePath. And that's, that one I like and I have, because that's a automated managed pension that will put you in aggressively. So you would choose your retirement age. You then choose your retirement age, and it would give you the reference for this pension fund. You would then choose this pension fund, and then it will put you in aggressively. It will put you into a different spread across the market, FTSE or S&P 500, and it will be in different areas. And then what it will do is, you come closer to retirement, it will start reducing you back into property bonds. Then it will drop you into government bonds. Then it will drop you into really, I think it would just finish off in government bonds, because then it's just really flat and plateaued. So you've gained this interest. It's been really nice and aggressive early on, but as you come close to that retirement age that you've chosen, it just drops you into this nice settling low end yield. So that way you haven't got to be thinking, 20 years down the line, oh my God, I've got to find, where's my paperwork for my pension? I remember I was in a risky fund. There's a market drop on the way, or that there looks like something's going to be rocky. You haven't got to worry about that, because it's all managed and it's all drip fed. And as long as you keep pumping into it, it'll be really healthy. But for me, that I don't mind looking 10, 15 years into the future, because it's a blueprint, it's proven. It's very unlikely I'm going to come up with the next, £1 billion idea. But this way, I know it, I understand it. I've mitigated my risk as much as possible in the areas we are involved in. And I also work with, with all the clients that invest. A lot of the clients that they go, so my clients will then go into the clients that I work with, but they haven't got to go in feeling, I've never done this before, because I just go, I'm doing it. You want to look at all my paperwork? Not that I often have to do that, but if there is someone who's completely skeptical and never done it before, I can say, look, or I can give them case studies that, I can't, we don't plaster case studies of what we do over social media, because that would be totally wrong, diving into people's personal investments. But when I do have someone new come in the picture and they've never worked with me, but they've come off a referral, well, the good thing is they've come off a referral. So that person who's referred has already done it. So they would have already showed them what they're doing. When they come to me, if we can have a face-to-face meeting, that'll be the first thing. And then I'll say, look, this is what it is. We'll go through all the brochures. We'll go through all the term sheets. I'll say, this is what we do as a family. This is what we've been doing for years. This is the proven. This is what we started with. This is what we have now. This is what we're forecasting. And then once you go through that, they go, yeah, I'll dip my toe in. And then they compound, they wait. Oh, it works. And then, then they refer and so forth and so forth. So, yeah, we kind of went off there. I mean, where we were, we went from stocks to there.
No, I love it, because actually one thing I was gonna ask you, which you're kind of going into a little bit, is what does the rest of this year and maybe next year look like for you in terms of how you're gonna maybe, and I hate using the word because everyone's using it, pivot maybe, or are you not pivoting and you're just carrying on as you were previously? Or is there anything new that you're actually looking to maybe try over the next 6, 9, 12 months?
So, I mean, the thing is, it's funny because when the lockdown happened, so we were closing off a few investors just before lockdown, and I knew it was going to happen, and I anticipated it to happen. Was we had investors just go, whoop, handbrake on, and they were like, we're going to wait, and I knew that was going to happen. So in the beginning, it was a little bit frustrating because there was a lot of handbrakes that were put on. However, I also knew that touching base maybe 4 or 5 weeks into the lockdown, the construction industry still has to roll. We still have to meet a demand of like 300,000 homes. Not that we will meet that, but there's still the demand. So it's still ticking over. Building sites have still been going on. They've had a lot of backing from the government. So they're still going on. So that's where a lot of my clients will sit, is within multi-asset construction sites. So I knew eventually it would pick up. So I wasn't really concerned about that. And to be honest with you, it's only got busier now. So we've had not only the ones who were handbrakes on, they're all back in touch. We've now completed several of those applications that have all gone through. And now the referrals again have started to pick up. So the ones who were a little bit hesitant, we were hesitant. So we were meant to be doing another investment. We put our own handbrakes on to an investor, to a developer that we worked with before. We just said, look, it's not the right time. Hope you understand. They were like, fine. Whereas now that we've picked up, we're certainly going to be looking at the beginning of next month, having another discussion of going back in now that things are picking up, because it's okay. It's picked up for what we do as a business in regards to the bigger asset class, because we're talking about bigger organisations who have got deeper pockets, deeper roots. That's fine. But when we're talking about a smaller, medium-sized company who's only doing a few units here and there, well, and they're only one avenue. So if it went wrong, it's only that site that you can take charge of, and then you've got the legal with that. Whereas with my bigger guys, because they're a multi-asset allocation of assets, if one went wrong, they can draw down on another. If that went wrong, they could sell another site. If that went wrong, they could sell certain units. And if it all went wrong, they'd sell all the company assets. And the company assets are huge. So that's why, for what we do as a business, that hasn't slowed down. But for our own personal investment choice into, like I was saying earlier, into smaller guys, we're now going to be looking again, probably in the next 2 weeks, at possibly issuing out some funds to those who have got a really good site. But it'd have to be a good site, because not everything's selling. So it's only getting busier. It's just, for us as a family, we'll be more wary on who we lend out to, because it's a smaller amount to a smaller company, So yeah, we'll think more.
Absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, I completely get that, and I'm certainly getting busier as well, which is always a good sign of things. And the media might tell us otherwise, but things I think are certainly picking up. But do you know what, Aaron? This happens every single time that I do one of these podcasts, that I just think I could carry on talking to you and all the other people that I have on my podcast for hours and hours. But I'm very wary of your time. Look, I just wanted to say a massive thanks for coming on today, Aaron. Everything that you've given us there has been incredibly valuable. And I love the fact that this podcast has taken a bit of a different turn to some of the other episodes that I've done. So certainly a load of value that I think you've been able to give a lot of people. But obviously, we've only really tapped the top of the iceberg. So if people want to sort of get in touch with you or find out a little bit more about what you do, or even maybe organise time to have a chat with you, what's the best way of following you online or getting in touch?
Well, we were going to touch on all the accountability group, weren't we, and all the calls. But what I would say is, if anyone wants to get in touch, I mean, jump on the calls, or just via social media. I try and reply to absolutely everyone. Or join the calls. The calls is probably a good way to. There's a little bit about me, and then what how it goes on, and then that's a good way to.
Yeah, and these are the Friday afternoon calls that you're doing with. I mean, you've had some incredible guests. You've had, I know you mentioned Mark Wright, Tej Singh. Who else have you had on so far as well? Remind me.
Yeah, Jason Greystone. So Jive Property were obviously good. I'm bringing in those who not necessarily have got the biggest followers, but the ones that we're going to get the most value. And I don't want each week to be the same. So it's. Obviously, Chris Taylor's part 2 this week, which will be really good. We're going to dive into something completely different. But some of the guests that are coming on, I don't want to release their names because I believe in jinxing things. But so it's only going to get better. And as we get bigger guests on, the bigger guys that I want to get on, they're obviously going to go, okay, well, they've had them on. We're going to get someone else. We'll jump on the call. So got big things for it. So, but social media.
Yeah, well, I know that you sort of publicise this through your stories on Instagram. So what I'll do is I'll definitely make sure in the show notes all of your sort of social media links are in there. But specifically for those listening that want to jump on those calls on a Friday afternoon, go and follow Aaron on Instagram, because on his stories throughout the week, not only I love the way that you kind of tease people with the announcements of who you're having on, which I think is really awesome. Maybe I should learn from that with my guests a little bit more. I'm just like, I'm so excited. I've got so and so on my show. Hello, everybody. Here it is. But also you obviously post those links throughout the week so people can jump on and I mean, you make it as easy as a lot of the time just sending you their email address on in reply to a story, which I think is fantastic. It makes it really easy for people. So that's great. So we'll make sure that people can get in touch with you that way. But look, before I let you go, there is one question that I ask every single podcast guest before they leave, because it's something very, very dear to my heart. And I'm always interested. Now, the thing is, I'm a bit worried about what you're going to say, because I've seen a few pictures of you recently. You're looking pretty buff. You're obviously a fit guy. I've realised during lockdown that I'm a massive chocoholic. So I'm always interested to find out what the favourite chocolate of my guests are. So is there anything that springs to mind? Have you got a particular passion?
I do like a Whisper. I'm partial to Whisper, but then I'm partial to a Turkish Delight.
Oh, no way.
I like Turkish Delight. Lion Bar. I mean, if I had to say my favourite chocolate, it would be a cream egg.
Oh, yes. Oh,
cream egg. That would be my favourite. And then, but gin. I'm a massive. If I'd swap chocolate any day for gin, I love gin. I mean, anyone would think I'm an alcoholic, but.
I'm a big gin lover as well, to be quite honest with you. There's unfortunately I've just moved to Solihull, just outside of Birmingham, and in a town nearby there was, actually it is in Solihull, there was a fantastic little gin bar that's just closed down, which I'm really upset about, because they had some great options for gin. But I'm glad you said cream egg though. It's one of my life ambitions to create an Easter egg size Cadbury's cream egg, which I'm sure isn't available because of the potential health risks that would come with that, consuming a cream egg of that size. But I'm glad that we're on the same page there. Cool. Well, look, Aaron, absolute pleasure. I'm sure we'll get you back at some point in the future to maybe talk a bit more about some in-depth investments and things like that. But for now, thanks ever so much for coming on. It's been a real pleasure chatting to you.
Pleasure. Today. No, really, thanks for having me, Sam. Really enjoyed it. So. And I'll see you Friday. If I don't speak to you before, I'm sure I'll speak to you on the group.
You definitely will.